Why, hello everybody. I'm here once again on a Washington beach to talk to you about psychedelics. In today's video specifically, what I want to talk about is why I believe it is absolutely essential that our culture integrates the safe use of psychedelics into it, specifically psychedelics that mimic serotonin like psilocybin, LSD, and DMT. And in this video, I'm going to talk about why I believe certain forms of modern suffering have arisen that can actually only be solved by some form of secular spirituality, and why I believe psychedelics are our gateway to secular spirituality. And so I hope you'll come along for the journey, and maybe we can think up some new thoughts together. All right, let's jump right into it. So the first form of suffering that I believe that psychedelics is a direct cure for is actually directly emergent because of our scientific progress. In the last 300 to 400 years, scientific rationality and materialism has brought the species further than we ever could have dreamed. We essentially live in an age of wonders and just don't realize it. And yet, many people are depressed, many people are lonely, many people feel extremely hollow inside. And so how is it that we have all this materialistic abundance and yet we don't feel whole? And I would argue that's because scientific materialism and rationality leaves out certain essential human needs. And you can call those spiritual needs, you can call those primitive needs, you can call those whatever you want to call it. But specifically what I want to talk about here is the role of transformative ritual. Transformative ritual is a process that goes back to the beginning of humanity. Initiation rites, celebrations around lunar and solar cycles are some of the oldest human behaviors that I'm sure we can track. And it seems that in our new materialistic culture, we've just assumed that there is no room anymore for initiation rites. If you are a secular individual and you're not part of any faith whatsoever, you really, outside of your birthday and I guess corporate holidays, have no type of ritualistic energy whatsoever. And so here is where I believe psychedelics can fundamentally revolutionize this. Psychedelics allow an encounter with the transcendent in a secular context. It doesn't matter what your background is when you take 7 dried grams of psilocybe cubensis. If you are a stuffy corporate lawyer and you have no belief whatsoever in levels of reality beyond what you can currently see, and you find no meaning in your life and you feel completely unintegrated into reality completely, if you take those mushrooms, you're going to realize very quickly that that is not the case. Larry the lawyer is extremely likely to come out talking about speaking to ancestral masks or perhaps something from Aztec culture. And that's a very, very unique property. Psychedelics can be called a lot of things, but absolutely what they are is an initiator into a transformative experience. And so I believe that guided transformative psychedelic experiences are very likely the direct answer to our culture's current lack of them. No longer do you need to adopt specific faiths like Christianity or Islam to have these transformative rituals. You now, in a secular context, can be guided by perhaps a psychotherapist or a therapist through a very high but safe dose of psychedelics and do essentially the entire archetype. You will be cast into chaos, you will have to dissolve yourself completely, then you'll have to extract knowledge and bring it back to transcend yourself. I think what's absolutely beautiful about this is that you can call it to some degree a secular baptism. If we think fundamentally about what a baptism is, it is an individual guiding your head below the waters that symbolizes chaos, only to bring you back up and reintegrate you with the group, and you call yourself reborn. This metaphor and this action in Christianity is exactly what can be replicated through a guided trip sitter and a powerful psychedelic experience. The second reason that I believe it is extremely important that our culture integrates the use of psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin into it is that it could fundamentally revolutionize the way that we analyze and problem solve. In this example, I'm talking specifically about engineers, scientists, lawmakers. Psychedelics have a property that allows you to essentially hit the factory reset on the back of your skull and analyze problems in ways that you never could have fathomed before. You have heightened perception to complexity that you never could have imagined, and more importantly, actually, psychedelics allow you to ask the fundamental question that many people do not ask, especially, say, professors who have been studying something for 50 years. And that question is, what if everything that I thought was wrong? What if from first principles down, I need to overturn everything? And that is something that could be extremely powerful in certain fields of study that have essentially grinded to a halt. Honestly, I believe that if the sanctioned use of psychedelics was completely normalized in our culture, we might see entire new fields of study emerge overnight. I think a good example to someone who hasn't taken psychedelics of what it would be like is, have you ever been working on a problem, say a math problem, and you just can't finish it, and so the next morning you look at it again and you try again, and it's like you're an entire new person. You're like, why didn't I just see that? And then you solve it instantly. Psychedelics could have that effect exponentially. We could have our best and brightest looking at problems in new ways that they could have only dreamed of beforehand. It's certainly a radical question, and that question is, what would happen if our elected officials, our best and brightest, and everybody who's responsible for thinking in this country was to take a psychedelic in a voluntary manner? What types of states would they experience? How would it change their outlook on what they're doing? Would they move to cabins in Siberia? Would they come up with new problems mathematically? Would they see geometry things that never could have been thought of before? Who knows? Would a doctor realize that he's been doing a treatment for patients wrong the entire time? It's something that I think about quite often because I sort of have a fantasy of everything that we understand at its core being completely overturned just by a culture that actually understands how to probe the mind deeply and think about questions from different directions. While I just talked about how it could revolutionize the way that we tackle material and scientific problems, also, it's absolutely worth realizing that this is obviously the most powerful tool for any type of psychology, psychotherapy, anything related to the study of the human mind. Because what you're doing when you do a high-dose trip is breaking the mind into its building blocks. You're literally smashing the mind down until it's in tiny pieces and then just looking at what's left. Now, I guess the closest example to this is a particle accelerator, where particles are accelerated so fast that they hit each other, ultimately essentially explode, and then we look at the pieces and figure out what's going on. So you can see the psychedelics as the proverbial mind accelerator that smashes you into oblivion and forces a psychologist to realize, why are there pyramids at the bottom of the psyche? Why are there alien beings that look completely strange at the bottom of the psyche? So those are problems that I look forward to our culture addressing. Now, regarding how our society would change for the psychonauts if it was culturally sanctioned, all I can say is, as a psychonaut myself, things would get extremely interesting. Psychotherapy is one thing and psychology is one thing, taking a materialistic, rational mindset towards the mind. But when individuals are allowed to feel comfortable and probe the depths of their consciousness with things like psilocybin and LSD, I think we would see creative works that we never could have even fathomed. I think that the wave of creativity that would emerge in this country would be unprecedented. I guarantee you that architecture would reach a level that it never had been seen before. Perhaps things would start to just look like the Greek pantheon and the Aztec pyramids. I think it is extremely important that we recognize the major mistake of the psychedelic movement in the 60s, and that was that we let people believe that the recreational experience on psychedelics was all there was, or that it was the most common way to use psychedelics. And if we as a collective culture now, in our modern era, can use psychedelics in a mature, tool-like fashion, and this can be seen by people that doctors, engineers, and other types of thinkers are using these as almost performance-enhancing thought drugs, I think public perception might change very rapidly, because when the first thought that comes into your great-granddad's mind about psychedelics is no longer a bearded, long-haired hippie, but a neuroscientist or a biochemist, I think we can see a big shift in public willingness to legitimize these substances. The next reason it is so important that we integrate substances like psilocybin into our culture goes directly to the healing benefits of this substance. At this point, headlines have been popping up all over showing the research from Johns Hopkins and certain other organizations showing the anti-addictive, antidepressive effects of high doses of psilocybin. But there's something that people may be missing in these headlines, and that's not that we just discovered a new molecule that flips a switch and makes us happy. It's not that we just found a new chemical trigger that's better at making us not addicted to something. What psilocybin is doing in all of these studies is mediating a powerful, transformative spiritual experience. That is unusual if you're not aware. The people that are getting these amazing benefits from these Johns Hopkins studies where they're saying that this is the most powerful experience they've had in their life and that they're no longer addicted to cigarettes or alcohol, or they've gone through their post-traumatic stress disorder, those benefits are coming after these people are being taken deep deep into the underworld on guided therapy sessions and fighting their demons. I find that immensely fascinating. What that tells us is that guided transformative experience is healing to the human psyche. And it really should be obvious. Like I said, we go back as old as time doing rituals with groups. It should have been obvious to us from the beginning that modifying the consciousness and allowing the self to dissolve and then rebuild itself would be the most healing thing that we can do. It shows us that we have a deep mechanism in the human mind that with guided help and acceptance from the tribe, we can be reborn and allow ourselves to shed these negative states and thought loops. Now, while it's also known that psilocybin and LSD can send you into tremendous thought loops, what they also can do is break you out of thought loops completely. When you take a high dose of a psychedelic, and let alone in a guided trip, what it can allow you to do is step directly outside these grinded deep frameworks that you've been operating under for so long. It allows you to, like in my previous point where the scientist asks himself, was I wrong about everything? It gives you essentially the personal version of that. While these studies were done on people who were experiencing depression or negative states, what is to say that somebody who has a mostly healthy mindset could not benefit tremendously from this type of guided experience? This is why this should be implemented across the country. I'm aware that certain organizations are doing this in South America or maybe through certain loopholes in certain states, but I want to see an entire wave of newly employed people who are literally sanctioned trip sitters. This could be a deeply, deeply meaningful role to many people in society. This is something that people have longed for, to deeply connect with others and to truly work with them through a very emotional and transformative experience. It's really, if you think about it, who humans are at their deepest level. And if this could be facilitated through a psychedelic, all the more beautiful. Let's bring on these empaths and bring on these people who, the next wave of psychotherapists, and allow them to treat people at the deep archetypal and even mythical substructure of the mind. That would be fascinating. Perhaps problems could be solved psychologically that would have taken months before in a single session. I think any culture that is able to successfully integrate the use of psychedelics like psilocybin into it is going to be a much more deeply empathic culture. When you take these substances, it often is an extremely emotional experience where you're faced with the realization that we are all here for a limited time, and that to waste your time on extremely negative states like hatred or envy is just a waste of time. When you're faced with, like I've said in previous videos, the infinite complexity of the actual world, it reduces you to first principles. And that can be so healing. That can be so relaxing to realize that, yeah, that's the reason that I can't look at my cell phone right now. It's so unnatural. But do you know what is natural? Family, friends, loss, regret, states like that. You realize that there are basics that you can always retreat to in this crazy complex modern world that we're in. And I think many people feel absolutely trapped in loops of behavior and activity. And what psychedelics allow you to do is say, there's a you before this. There's a you before all these superficial layers of ego stacked on top. And now, I'm not trying to be a critic of modern culture, but it does to some degree seem to be extremely superficial, extremely meaningless. And I think that reflects in the fact that a lot of us feel meaningless. And psychedelics allow a contact with meaning. Often, many people come out of a psychedelic experience realizing to some degree their meaning or the meaning of life or how they can live best to avoid suffering. And that is something that I truly wish everybody could experience to some degree, because it's just that important. I think if I were to abstractly say the ultimate reason why it is so important that our culture integrates these substances, it is that because we are such a balance of a primitive beast and a wise, enlightened modern man, it's so important to remember the primitive beast. It's so important to remember your roots and to remember your ancestors, and that you are just a bipedal ape wearing an outfit trying to figure out what's going on, because you can genuinely forget that. You can put on that work outfit every day and start to think that you're actually different than the other apes, because when you sit behind a desk or you have any form of authority or power, you can really let your ego develop around that. But what I've called previously grand leveling effect that psychedelics offer allows you to drop that completely and to realize that there's no need whatsoever for this ego, and there is no need whatsoever to lose contact with the primitive truth about who you are at your fundamental being. It doesn't undermine your intellectual pursuits or what you're trying to be or your posturing to take a step back and to realize that, hey, it's all an act. We're all playing a big collaborative game here, and we're all just trying to figure out what's going on. Don't take yourself too seriously. And ultimately, I believe a society that took psychedelics hopefully will not take itself too seriously. All right, well, I think that's going to bring a close to some of the reasons I believe it is absolutely vital that we integrate these substances into our culture in a safe manner. And so before I go, I want to thank all of you. I'm almost at 20,000 subscribers. This is absolutely insane to me. You guys, 5 months ago, I had seriously 10 subscribers. I think I have a video on my channel doing a 10 subscriber special. And so for that, I just want to thank you very much. And also, before I go, I want to advertise my Discord, a community of almost 2,000 psychonauts just waiting to have a deep, meaningful discussion with you about all the things that this video just covered and much, much more. There are people that make me seem like a chimpanzee walking around in there because of their intellect. So I welcome you to come join and see what that's like. Last but not least, it is the legends of this channel. It is the pillars of this community. It is the Patreon supporters. And this group has grown tremendously in recent days, and I'm so grateful. And so I'm going to say every single name on the Patreon list. Here we go. Jason Barnes, Devin Hall, Rudy Riza, Sarup Chapagain, Yehuda Pesture, Dylan Duree, that's Joseph in the Discord, Leo Avila, Ethan Beadle, Kane Brown, Clayton Rogers, Christian Bernadelle, Justin Mumma, Nathan Milbrandt, Nato, Jerry Sedaner, Turtle Toast, Nathan Yesharon, Damian Scoose, Austin, not the Steed, Austin, the Little Quentin, and Andrew Dowling. Thank you guys so much for your support. It means the world to me, and I'll see you guys next time.